So at the beginning of the year, I made a video talking about how we getting all these prequels, requels, sequels, reboots of all these different iconic franchises, movies, shows turned into TV shows, etc. Just and so on. And I talked about how some of these are never as good as their predecessor, or are just downright terrible and bad. So that made me come up with this video there to talk about the ones that definitely did not deserve a reboot and did not do the main story of the older shows, movies, comics, anything. It didn't do it any type of justice at all. And then bring in shows I think could use a reboot or would be good with a reboot and can revamp things, make it better, etc. So for this video, I'm probably gonna do 5 shows that reboots just weren't that good, or they didn't deserve it, it wasn't necessary, or didn't add anything to the story, or just ruined the past show more than it already was. And then I'm gonna do 5 shows I think could be due for a reboot, could make sense, and have some type of role, could revamp it, add on to it, make it better in some type of way. And I also know there's a pretty thin line between the difference of a spin-off and a reboot. Like the spin-off is related to the original version where they continue the story elsewhere or something like that, and whereas a reboot version doesn't have any connection with the older version and it's like a different take, gives different elements of that story. So like a spin-off, Pretty Little Liars for example, the spin-off will be Ravenswood, and the Pretty Little Liars original sin will be seen as a reboot. But for most of these, there's a pretty thin line between spin-off and reboot, so we're just gonna dive into it. Be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy. Let's jump into them. Let's get this one out the way right now. Probably one of the worst reboots I ever seen. We gotta go with Gossip Girl. Now, I literally just made a video probably about 2 weeks ago at this point talking about how Serena Vanderwoodson is one of the worst main characters in any prominent teen drama. But if I said that, I obviously didn't point out this Gossip Girl reboot and their main character. This whole entire show is just bad and outright sucks. Like there's no other words or nothing positive to really say about it. It loses all substance and all vital pieces that made the original Gossip Girl good in the first place. And this show was recently, come to find out, was just canceled because the new season was out and no one even knew it was out, and it was just not being watched. So this show was canceled at HBO Max, and deservingly so. And I know these people had jobs, just their lives, etc. But the show overall was just not good. No likable characters, no good storylines or scenes. It lost all substance the original Gossip Girl had. No enticing plots and storyline. It's like it was trying to figure what the show was about while using the iconic Gossip Girl moniker as their main way to pull in viewers week and week. But it honestly didn't do anything to capitalize off using the Gossip Girl name. But this was the easiest show to put on this list. It really just handles everything dealing with the story poorly. It handles the character's relationship poorly, especially the main character and her own sister. It handles the storylines and characters' decision very poorly. And it just doesn't do a good job in making anything interesting or enticing to make you want to watch it on a week-to-week basis. So this is easily one of the worst reboots, and it didn't help having to be a reboot of one of the most iconic teen dramas of all time. Now, the first series I want to talk about for that could or need a reboot is Harry Potter. Now, I don't necessarily think the movies need a reboot, and I'm only talking about this because it's just been recently speculated and talked about how HBO is doing a 7-season series for each of the books. And the Harry Potter franchise is only 2 decades old for the first movies and just over a decade for the final movie, I believe. So it's not that old or doesn't necessarily need a reboot. Like the movies are fun. But there are a lot of things in the books that could be fleshed out better shown, better adapted, especially with today's CGI and quality compared to back then. I think the main problem people have with this series getting a reboot or revamped is that some vital pieces will be changed that will ruin their nostalgia or how they enjoyed the franchise in the past, and that's due to reboots just arguably being bad. Like, all reboots have naturally not been as good as the original series, franchise, or whatever it stems from. So people just have fear that this series won't be as good as the movies were. But I do think they have the ability to adapt and flesh out way more things than the movie ever could. And with having it 7 seasons, I think they could adapt this perfectly. Now, the thing that's the most skeptical about a Harry Potter remake is while they can fix and flesh out a lot can go wrong as well. I mean, just think, some of these actors play these characters almost to perfection or greatly that anybody that try to replace them will always be compared to how good these characters were acted in the past, and they could really fuck that up. Like, who's gonna play Harry? Like, who's gonna play Ron? Who's gonna play Hermione, Dumbledore? Who's gonna play these characters? So while a lot can go right, a lot can go wrong, but I am interested to see how this turns out. I'm also just optimistic because compared to Netflix, Hulu, Peacock, or anything, I would say that HBO is the best at adapting things or bringing one media form to another and still making it great. So I have faith in HBO that they could do this and possibly get it done. But if something needs a reboot and it's as a big franchise as Harry Potter and it could be better in certain ways, I think they go for it. And obviously this is most likely just to make even more money and capitalize off the fans that still enjoy Harry Potter before it grows out this generation and the new generation knows nothing about it. But I still think there could be some positives and it could be adapted well. The next show that definitely did not need a reboot in any shape, way, or form is Pretty Little Liars. And we could go back to the original spinoff, Ravenswood, where they took Hannah's boyfriend from the original show, put him over there, try to do a supernatural style show that flopped, wasn't good. We could talk about Pretty Little Liars Perfectionist, where they took Allison and Mona, grew up on college campus, teaching, they have new students, new characters, flopped, wasn't good. Or we could even talk about Pretty Little Liars Original Sin. The new one came out around last year, I believe, where it's like supposed to be a horror spin-off of Pretty Little Liars. Flopped, not that good either. And I think the problem with this show getting a spin-off is not just how iconic the original show is, but because of the original show's failures and ability and what they're trying to do and trick the watchers into thinking this, seeing this, ultimately backing themselves in a corner and ruining the ending of the show. With these spin-offs, it's all lost all luster of anything being mystery or trying to find clues or solve anything or make any form of sense, I guess. Like I said, the main point for this argument was gonna be the new one, Pretty Little Liars Original Sin, and the problem with this is it's supposed to be a horror-sized spin-off of Pretty Little Liars, the original. Like, this supposed to be a bigger threat. He's a murderer, killing everybody, out to get them, etc. But it honestly feels like a horror 13 Reasons Why. Like, the storyline isn't as good or compelling or as interesting as the original series. The girls who are supposed to be playing the liars, they're all basically just as bland as Emily was in the original series. There is a good performance from the main actor, but the group of girls together with one another, they don't necessarily feel like friends. They don't all necessarily feel important. They have terrible subplots throughout the whole story, and when it does connect at the end, it doesn't feel worth it or paid off, especially for a show that only has 1 season so far. You were at least captivated in the Pretty Little Liars world for multiple seasons before you started to realize their bullshit. But the Pretty Little Liars Original Sin just doesn't do that. I also think it doesn't help that the main storyline and whole mystery is centered around what the parents did 20 years ago and not necessarily the girls and their secrets. And also Imogen, she's supposed to be like the smart detective of this, but it doesn't really seem like she figures anything out. It feels like they want the story and plot to move along, so she comes up with ideas of what might have happened on a whim, and they just want to continue the story, so they all go along with it. But she doesn't really find anything out, or it doesn't make sense how one point leads to another. And the biggest problem, which was also a problem in the first TV show, the first Pretty Liars, is the girls never really feel in danger. Like, would they actually kill off one of the girls? I highly doubt it. And this is supposed to be a horror take on Pretty Little Liars. So if they don't even do that well or execute that, then how could this be considered any type of upgrade, revamped version of a great series? And it's not even really good at the mystery portion either. But overall, yeah, we didn't need Ravenswood, Perfectionist, and we damn sure didn't need Original Sin. Now, this one for a reboot is heavily controversial, and that is Glee. Now, I have a whole video coming out about Glee that's literally 45, almost 50 minutes long. I'm still editing. I've been editing this video for over a month. So if you are looking forward to that, please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you want to see that. But Glee is heavily controversial, and I'll get into my video why. I don't really want to go into details here, but I want to go into details of why I would like to see it. And it's simply just because there's a lot of songs, music, and artists that have emerged since Glee has ended and that they never did and done. Now, I do think they would switch it up and do it more in a style like a Victorious from Nickelodeon, where they do a school of art where all the kids are like this and they build storylines around that instead and make it a little more serious. And I think Glee I just want to see them do new emerging artists that they haven't done before. Now, obviously, the problem for this reboot is they really wouldn't be able to bring back too many of the main cast. Like I said, I'll talk about that in my Glee video. Let me know in the comments if you want to see that. And if they do the reboot, it'll mainly be new cast members, people we aren't really too familiar with. We'll have to get re-immersed into the world of Glee, and I just hope they make the switch, like I said, and do it in the style of a Victorious school of art and make it more, not necessarily unique because it's been done before, but not necessarily make it different from the way Glee was originally. I just think there's been a lack of musical representation in shows, movies, from even the Nickelodeon age of Victorious, Big Time Rush, the Disney of the High School Musical, to all the way to the Simpsons Zombies, to the TV shows like Empire, Star, etc. So I think a musical show would just be perfect, and I think Glee would be the best at being revamped into something else and make it better for this new era of TV. So Glee is definitely a controversial pick, but I could see it getting revamped and doing new things with better storylines, better songs, and new emerging artists. Next up on shows that I personally think didn't necessarily need a reboot, we have Bel-Air from Peacock. Now, this is honestly the show on my list that's probably nothing's really wrong with it. Like, it's just fine. And not to say like nothing's wrong or there's no issues with the plot, characters, or anything like that, but the show isn't necessarily bad. And I do enjoy a great deal of the actors. Coco Jones, the Easy to Block captain from Battle Rap in the first season. I love Battle Rap, so I enjoy a lot of it. But once again, I just don't think it was warranted or necessarily needed. It doesn't really add anything to the franchise or how big Fresh Prince was back in the day. I think we're just in an era with the lack of good teen dramas. To bring back something like Bel-Air, already with an established name, set it in the world of these teen dramas, social issues, high school issues, teen drama, like I said, and it just made sense to do, I guess. But I still doesn't necessarily mean I think it was warranted or very much needed. And once again, like I said, it's not really bad. Like, it's really just a good, alright show. Like, it has good qualities, okay qualities, etc. I just think it doesn't bring anything new or refreshing to that franchise or anything to point to directly and be like, oh, that's different, that's exciting. So, I don't know. It just doesn't necessarily feel warranted, I guess. I know a lot of people are gonna disagree with this list, so put down in the comments shows you think didn't need reboots or shows you think do need reboots, because I want to see your guys' opinions as well. So leave a like, comment, subscribe, and put all your opinions down in the comment section. Now, the next show I think would do well with a reboot. I was gonna put my bias in it and talk about One Tree Hill, one of my favorite teen drama shows. Not just teen drama, but favorite TV shows all time. If you're a One Tree Hill fan, let me know in the comments, because I would love to talk about that show and make it to a video. But then I thought about it and thought it would make more sense to do a show or a reboot of Degrassi. Now, Degrassi was the teen drama show of the 2000s. Started in 2001, was basically the struggle on life of teens growing up, sexuality, drugs, etc., all through high school. And I think this show would benefit more for a reboot now because of the way society and things are now, and because they do new generations, new classes, new people. They benefit more from having a bunch of characters each and every season, and they did a great job at making each character feel important or have a special storyline sooner or later. They also did a great job with the cast and picking people to play these roles who then went on to have bigger characters and roles in later franchises and become A-listers, like Nina, who eventually became the main character of Vampire Diaries. Shay Mitchell went from Degrassi to Pretty Little Liars, and the obvious Drake. Like, Degrassi was almost soap opera-y in the teenage world, basically transitioning them from teenagers into adulthood, and I think it overall did a pretty good job, and it could definitely benefit nowadays for a reboot with new interesting characters that they could continue it on from. And it just makes the most sense of any teen drama from the early 2000s to do a reboot of. One thing that Degrassi also did that I fucking love and that shows don't do nowadays, they actually casted fucking teenagers to play teenagers. Crazy, right? We don't get that no more. Look at Riverdale, Outer Banks, any teen drama show now, it's adults playing kids. Like, that makes no sense. So big ups for them for actually doing that. So I think overall Degrassi would just be grounded in more realism compared to shows and dramas nowadays. It would make more sense, be more believable, and I just think it will overall work better in today's society. So if any show on this list definitely needs a reboot or deserves one, I think Degrassi is definitely at the top of that list. I actually just seen while filming this video that Degrassi was supposed to get a reboot, but it got canceled at HBO Max. Now, this could be for multiple reasons, I think. I think one could be the failure of Gossip Girl. They didn't want to have another teen drama. They reboot, it doesn't work out, it failed, they're wasting money, etc. That could be one reason. Two, they just had a massive success with House of the Dragon, a lot of CGI, a lot of budget they have to put into that. They also was focused on the Last of Us adaptation that they had to go on focus. And there was probably already rumblings about the Harry Potter series and franchise, which is also going to use a lot of CGI, bigger budget, and they just couldn't take a risk focusing on another teen drama, especially with the failure of Gossip Girl. But I still do think Degrassi is one of the best shows and options to get a reboot. Now, the next show I have on this list is Criminal Minds Evolution. Now, I love Criminal Minds. I rewatched like the first 10 to 11 seasons very frequently, like at least once a year. But with the new Criminal Minds Evolution, with the removal of so many big prominent characters in the series, from Gideon to Hotch to Morgan, and now Reed, Matthew Gray Gubler, who's probably my favorite actor and plays the best character in the show, I just feel like it's time for the show to end. A reboot wasn't necessary. And that's saying a lot, because I've seen in the reboot they're focused on one specific person, specific killer throughout the whole season, and that's usually when the show is at its best, when they're focused in on one main villain for the entire series or for an entire stretch of episodes. That's when it's the best. Literally, like with the Reaper and so on and so forth, those type of villains that target the group or members of the group specifically, those are when the show is usually the best. But now it's just not the same amount of prominent characters. It doesn't feel the same now that it's with Paramount. It definitely doesn't look the same. I don't know, it just feels like it's time for it to come to an end. And I didn't finish the season of Evolution. I only watched like the first 2 episodes, so I'm only speaking in a limited amount of information. But I don't know. I just think it's time for the series to come to an end. It's almost like a Grey's Anatomy thing. After so many years and seasons, most of the prominent characters are gone, and we don't really feel like getting in tune and in touch with the new ones and learning to love them. So I think it's time for this whole series to just come to a close. Yes, and I do know that most of the characters there have been there for a while, but they still aren't the prominent characters that I've missed and loved from the very beginning to like the first 11 seasons of the show. Yes, I know they all been there a few seasons, so don't be in the comments saying that. Yes, I know, but it still isn't the same. Like I said, I frequently rewatch it, mainly seasons 1 through 10, I believe, because Morgan leaves at the end of 9 and Hash is gone at the beginning of 10, like around episode 5, 6 or something, or maybe it's season 11, but whichever, like, I don't think it should have continued any further than probably 12, 13 seasons, but now it had like 15, 16 seasons, and now it got this reboot that I heard got renewed for another season. So I don't know, it might be good. Like I said, I'm speaking from limited information about the show, but I just think it's time for it to come to an end. A reboot wasn't really necessary, doesn't really get anything out of it. But I do know shows like this typically do go on for a while. You know, Law and Order, NCIS, CSI, whatever. All these type of shows just usually go on for 20 plus seasons. But I do think it's time for it to come to a close. Now, I wanted to throw in a fun one, and this one is for Disney. Now, Nickelodeon, we seen them do the reboot of iCarly, and Disney, we seen them do the reboot of Raventone. But I think for both of those stations, those weren't really the right reboots to do. And I mentioned it in the Glee part earlier about Nick. They could have did like a Victoria-style reboot. That would have been cool and much better in my opinion. And I think for Disney, a Wizards of Waverly Place reboot would easily be the best reboot and the biggest they could do for Disney Channel. Now, obviously, that's hard enough to get done with Selena Gomez being one of the most famous people in the world now, being one of the biggest stars in acting, pop, music, just anything, fashion, makeup, cosmetology, anything. She's just one of the biggest people in the world. So that would be really hard to pull off in the first place. But if it was ever to get done or ever a show that needed a reboot for Disney, Wizards of Waverly Place would easily be the biggest and best. It's already the best Disney Channel show of all time in my opinion, with the best protagonist being Alex Russo. And I just think the world and story of the Wizards of Waverly Place could have been explored more, especially with now and all the time that has passed. And we seen that they have the podcast now. The characters that play Harper and her dad, they had the podcast. They brought her on. They're talking about the series, ways it could have ended, ways it could have continued, etc. I saw one person who worked with the show say it should have ended with her giving up her powers for love the way her dad did. And I think that would have been amazing going into a spinoff, and she's in the role of her father now, teaching her kids just the way he gave up his powers for love. She did the same, and it could have continued from there. I think it just would have been the most interesting Disney reboot they could possibly do. And also, all these people are still, all the actors are still in pretty good spots, meaning they didn't go Disney crazy. Like, let's be honest, we know a lot of actors and stars that come from Disney are never the same. But for the most part, these people are still in good high spirits. And I think Disney will welcome them back, especially with Selena Gomez, her giving her approval of this. I think it would probably be the biggest thing on Disney since The Descendants, to be honest. I also want to make a whole video about maybe Wizard of Waverly Place or why everybody loves Selena Gomez in its own right. So leave a like, comment, subscribe if you want to see that, because I might have that coming in the works as well. But like I said, Wizards of Waverly Place easily the best Disney show they could add. Next up on the definitely not needed, we have Witcher, The Blood Origin. Now, I never watched The Witcher because I thought this was tied in with the other one specifically, and I only heard nothing but negative reviews about Blood Origins. So I never watched the original The Witcher, but I do watch The Critical Drinker and Moist Critical, and I've seen their videos on Blood Origin and just how horrendous it is. But I was mistaken in thinking this one and the original The Witcher was the insane. But obviously this was a prequel, I guess, a spin-off showing the origins of how the first Witcher came to be. I don't know, like I said, I never watched it, I'm not in tune, but I can read Rotten Tomato scores, and this one is in the shitter, and it says a lot when the critics and the audience just completely shit on your whole show. Like, they both agree that this is just terrible. Like, I can't even go into details how I did for Pretty Little Liars and how I did for the other series because I really don't know much about it. But I do know that this was obviously a mistake and everybody seems to agree. And if I excluded it from the list, I'm sure the comments will be loaded with me talking about this for a follow-up video. But you could put other shows that I don't have in this video in the comments and I might make a part 2. But I had to have The Witcher Blood Origins. But I think I can tie up why people don't like it. Apparently the whole story is dysfunctional. It doesn't make sense how one point leads to another. The characters' decisions are just distasteful, doesn't have any understanding or comprehension of their actions. And I just guess it doesn't follow the story that has already been told or the source material, so to say. I don't know if there's source material, but I used to hear that a lot with The Witcher, how they move away from the source material. So I don't know if this does that as well, but the whole story is just dysfunctional. So yeah, I had to add The Witcher Blood Origin as my last and final unnecessary reboot. And the last show or franchise I think could be due for a reboot, or at least in my opinion, this is definitely a personal one. I always wanted a big giant horror franchise to do a TV show. Now we got it with Chucky, and I think they done that pretty well, so in my opinion. And we also got it with Scream, a TV series, which a lot of people really didn't like, but I very much enjoyed, and I made a whole video about why I enjoyed Scream, the TV series. But I always wanted these TV series to do a TV show style, basically going in more detail of the characters, make the deaths feel more important, have an overarching plot that ties everything together that makes more sense than just reveals, kills, etc. Just make the story more enticing, more hurtful when characters die, and etc. So I thought I wanted to do it for since we already got Chucky and Scream, which is probably the two best horror franchises they could possibly do it for. It's hard to really find a franchise that they're able to do that with, and I think honestly the only other horror franchise I could see it possibly happening with is Saw. Now, I only remember watching like the first 2 Saw movies, but I do think I know that there was one guy overseeing, controlling the whole games and everything, and throughout the stories and movies, they were beginning to tie in with one another and make more sense. Now, I do think they got convoluted along the way. They had less time for some characters just weren't in the movies anymore, and etc. So I think if they do it in a TV show and do it in that way, have more time to flesh out the characters, the kills, the story, etc., I think this franchise could definitely be revitalized. I think it had a movie not too long ago. Not sure how it did at the box office or anything, but I think this is a franchise that can be revitalized and worked in a TV show setting, kind of like a Scream or a Chucky. Like I said, this is a personal take and it's very much so my opinion. I don't know how many of you would agree with this, but I don't know. We really don't get these big horror franchises in TV show formats, and I feel like when they come out as movies, you're either left wanting more, they just wasn't getting enough, you just aren't usually always satisfied because they cram everything into a 2, maybe 2.5 hour movie tops. And when you do that, you leave things out, everything isn't fully developed, you couldn't make sure the story made sense in any way. And I think if they do that with Saw, I think they could revitalize the franchise, like I said, and put it back in the upper echelon of horror franchises. But overall, that's it for this video of unnecessary reboots versus shows or franchises I think can get a reboot and can work. So, like I said, leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know any other shows you think didn't need a reboot or shows that could use a reboot. Let me know any other videos you want me to make, whether it's teen drama, horror, actors, anything about specific people. Leave that all down below in the comments. We're on the road to 400 subscribers. We're so close. Like I said, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'm out.